welcome to Concussion Talk Podcast. I'm Nick Mercer. Please visit my website at www.concussiontalk.com and please consider supporting Concussion Talk on Patreon at www.patreon.com/concussiontalk. This podcast is sponsored by Premier Athletic Therapy and Sports Medicine. You can visit them online at premierathletictherapy.com. If you're in St. John's, you can book an appointment for athletic therapy, kinesiology, or massage online. I'm with Matt Debicki now, and Matt is going to tell us about his titles and introduce the Able Sail program and a nonprofit. And so, Matt, all your titles and what Able Sail is, basically. Able Sail Newfoundland is. Newfoundland and Labrador.
So you've left me a loaded question already there, Nick.
Yes, I know I have.
Because all my titles, I wear about 7 different hats that have to do with boating in Newfoundland. But we'll just talk about the 2 that most pertain to this. Most importantly, I'm the president and founder of Able Sail NL, which is a nonprofit that aims to help break down barriers that are perceived or exist for people with disabilities to go sailing, and at the same time to do any kind of ancillary functions that will help to make us reach that goal. And the other hat I wear in this domain is that I'm the manager of the Royal Newfoundland Yacht Club Sailing School.
Oh, well, there you go. So, you obviously know what you're talking about. So, start out then. How old is this program? Well, in Newfoundland and Labrador. To start off, how new is it, or how old are they? Say?
So, the Royal Newfoundland Yacht Club. I wish I could tell you. I've only.
That's on the website. That's 1964.
But it's 1960 which?
1964. I saw on the website.
That sounds about right.
And so, but Able Sail NL is how old?
As of March 2019.
Okay, so very new. And you got the idea for this program in Newfoundland and Labrador? How?
Well, so I've got a background of working with people with disabilities. I mean, I paid for my university by being a live-in care worker for clients with cerebral palsy. Even before then, I had a neighbor who used a wheelchair and at 14 wanted to play wheelchair basketball. So his dad hired me to drive him to wheelchair basketball. As soon as I found out how great a sport it was, I joined in. So I played wheelchair basketball in Manitoba for a couple of years. And then later in life, I kind of gravitated back to it by seeing an accessible sailboat that was sitting in port in the UK when I was working as a professional sailor. Went and visited it and ended up getting hired aboard. Did about 6 months on the boat, traveling around a little bit with the boat and getting it ready for an Around Britain challenge that the owner, who's a quadriplegic, had set himself. And then at one point I went and took a break while the boat was sitting on dry dock and getting a bunch of refit work. Came back to it later, got hired as the captain of the boat once it was created as a charity. So all in all, I worked about 3.5 years for that boat, and might even still be working there today if the wings that it had instead of sails hadn't fallen off entering the Thames estuary.
Okay, can I ask you about that?
Yeah, sure. So the neat thing about this boat was that it was a trimaran, which means it has 3 hulls connected by one main deck, which meant for a sailboat it would keep almost flat in no matter the seas. And it had these big fixed wings, which you're starting to see on America's Cup boats now. And these wings were instead of sails, which meant that whoever was controlling the boat needed to use a joystick to control it. So instantly, this was a seamless integration between whether or not you had an able body, or if you had difficulty with movement, or even if you were to use a sip and puff control system, you could control the boat in almost the same manner as anybody else.
So it's computerized or very mechanical?
Yeah, it was the idea was eventually to have a computer that could control everything, but the truth was the control system was very much um, manually done by running switches or joysticks to move the wings and stuff. They had never become automated.
Wow, geez, I'm learning all this. This is fascinating stuff. But we'll actually get to you because I mean I don't know if many people listening know exactly where Newfoundland is. Newfoundland and Labrador. Newfoundland and Labrador is the province, but Newfoundland is the island itself, and St. John's is on the east coast of the island. Just for giving people an idea where I am. But so how did Newfoundland people from Newfoundland may be surprised here that you are not from a seafaring city or town, or I mean, you're you're not exactly from the coast, let's say. So, where are you from, and how did you get involved in sailing?
So I'm from Winnipeg, which is in the middle of the Canadian prairies, and I feel like that might have been the start of a love for the sea. Was that those long, sloped, rolling, gently plains look a lot like the ocean, really.
Yeah.
But in fact, I grew up sailing. My first sailing regatta was at 4 months old on Lake of the Woods, which is a big lake with 10,000 islands and 65,000 miles of shoreline, just out of Winnipeg. So I grew up sailing there my whole life, and then bumped into boats going across the Atlantic and jumped on them. And then from there, just moved my way up the sailing world.
And what does that mean, moving out to sailing world? You were a professional captain or sailor, you said? You
Yeah,
mentioned?
I was a captain of private sailing yachts. So I like to say I worked for the richer than famous. So the people that I worked for, you would never hear about, but they definitely were worth a lot more money than any of the A-list celebrities we see, other than maybe Oprah.
Yeah, okay. And you're in the Mediterranean, right?
So we would often do Mediterranean in the summer, uh, and then Caribbean in the winter was a lot of my gigs. I've also gone way up high up to Norway, all the way through the Greek islands, through the Panama Canal and the entire Pacific. So yeah,
So you have extensive sailing experience, obviously. So that brings us back to this Able Sail program here in Newfoundland and Labrador. In tell people where exactly it is. It's at the
so
Royal Newfoundland. Sorry, go ahead.
so Able Sail NL. The idea is to promote accessible sailing anywhere in Newfoundland and Labrador. And at present, the low-hanging fruit was the Royal Newfoundland Yacht Club. We're really keen to host a an accessible sailing program, and are the only sailing school in the province. They also happen to have a sailing school building that had accessible bathrooms and a somewhat accessible club and facility. So it was a very easy, low-hanging fruit in the matter that we needed to build a couple of ramps, install some lift systems, and we were already up and running out of the Royal Newfoundland Yacht Club. The hope would be to move to, Holyrood, Lewisport, etc., and spread the Able Sail NL kind of banner throughout. The way Able Sail works is Able Sail doesn't operate any sailing programs. Someone who wants to operate a program would hopefully approach us and say, hey, we want to do accessible sailing here. And we would then say, how can we help? We would use our nonprofit status, which by fall we hope to become a national charity, to be able to help with them applying for grants and fundraising activities, and then use the knowledge base that we as a nonprofit have developed, and including a lot of the knowledge that I've gained in the past, and then we would help that club provide accessible sailing. So, for example, last weekend, Able Sail NL used some of the funds that it's applied for through grants to fly in instructors from Halifax that train a Sail Canada developed module on parasailing, so sailing for people with disabilities.
Oh, geez, wow, yeah, bigger than I thought. So that's very impressive. So what was the next? Yeah. So you said you've been you've created a market of this year. So just was that just 3 months ago, or not even 3 months ago? But how long have you actually been sailing with people able to sail? How long have participants been involved? Past like month or 2 months or?
So the first sale that we did for people with this that was accessible to people with disabilities was, I'm gonna say, 2 weeks ago,
Okay.
and yeah, and now we're going like gangbusters since then. Today, in fact, we were interviewed by NTV, and they did a little following us around for a few hours today, while a few of our sailors were sailing on our bigger sailboat, which is a 26-foot keel boat,
Cool.
and on a couple of access sailing dinghies, which are small boats that are very good for adaptive sailing, as they have a seat that can accommodate a wide range of physical needs. They have a joystick that's very simple to use and doesn't require a lot of strength, and they only have one rope to pull in and out to adjust the sail. So this means for a very wide range of people, they can just get right in and learn how to sail nice and quickly. And most importantly, these access sailing dinghies are designed so that they're extremely unlikely to capsize, which then allows us to capture people with not only physical disabilities, but say, for example, someone with cognitive disorders who might have a delayed reaction time, or might even, for example, even just have a fear of the water. They're now in a boat that if they just let go of all the controls, the boat will just sit there and bob like a duck until someone comes and assists them.
That's perfect. So for these sessions, you've been out in Conception Bay. Is that where you do sailing?
Yeah, so with the little access dinghies so far, we've been doing right in the bay right in front of the yacht club, which may be called Manuel's Bay. My geography is still a little weak. It's one of my weaker points, despite having sailed the world.
Well,
Um,
between the yacht club and say Bell Island, that's
well,
all.
no, this is even the smaller
Oh,
bay
you
right
mean the
in
lagoon
the
there,
harbor.
man?
It's where we've been with the access dinghies so far. We
Or
definitely could go out to the outer harbor with the access dinghies, but that
okay,
would be as people's skill levels progress.
right.
And then with the larger boat, the keel boat, we have sailed outside the harbor and gone and checked out some icebergs and all that fun stuff as well.
Yeah, of course. So how far is this now? Going a bit off able sales, but when you were say doing the able sail program in England, how far? Where would you go over that? I mean, I don't know English sailing geography too well, except for I know the ocean is there. But were you on the ocean
Yeah,
there?
so with the vessel Adventure, which was this 60-foot trimaran, we sailed around Britain with it. I did about half of the journey,
Yeah.
so kind of in 100-mile legs, and then with each couple of legs, a new person with a disability would jump aboard, usually a paraplegic,
Oh,
and be one of the crew. And then the boat was captained actually by Trevor Jones, the owner of the boat, who is a quadriplegic. And then also while working with the Adventure Trust, which was the trust that managed that boat once it was converted over to being a charity, we did a lot of projects with other people with disabilities. So we would do little boat trips with people with mental disabilities. We got involved in a project with Hilary Lister, who's a very famous sailor in the entire sailing community, but especially in the accessible sailing community, as she's the first quadriplegic to have sailed solo across the English Channel in a sip and puff controlled boat. And that boat
yeah.
was built with some help from Pindar, a big racing team, and then my rugby team, who were all voluntold to come help me build it. And the parts came from me taking her old wheelchair apart and using the control systems from her sip and puff wheelchair to operate the sails and the steering from the boat, along with, of course, some help from a few mad scientists, etc., to help me make the sip and puff system talk to the wheelchair parts once they were no longer a wheelchair.
And you're not that mad scientist.
Pardon me? No, I'm
You're not that.
that
You're
part.
you're you're mad, but
I,
not
I
science.
call myself more MacGyver than a mad
Ah,
scientist.
I see.
Yeah.
So actually, well, so this kind of brings me to my. I wrote a little post today in Able Sail Facebook page, Able Sailing for Newfoundland and Labrador Facebook page. And so what can I asking if anyone's interested in sailing, so that's how I contacted you for Able Sail. So how would people contact you other than just your Facebook page, or would if you're interested in Newfoundland and Labrador to go?
So we're still developing our program model. We're that new. The easiest thing to do is to simply sign up for the sailing school, either the adult or the youth programs, and then you would notify the sailing school that you have a few barriers that you think might cause an issue with learning how to sail, and then we would work with the person to see whether or not we have a suitable level of adaptations to make sailing accessible to the person. So, for example, this year we don't have any sip and puff control systems. That's something we hope to have in the future.
Right.
So there's a limitation for being able to actually maneuver the vessel, etc. That said, we have a hoist system and a willingness to do some seat adaptations and stuff. So we would work with someone and maybe bring them aboard, and they can start to learn, I like to call it through osmosis, just by being aboard and watching. Yeah. Which in truth, that's how a lot of people on bigger boats learn how to sail. They first start by just sitting on the boat and watching, and then eventually asked to do more and more tasks. So there's that way, and then there are 2 weekends of able sailing, kind of, I call it bums and boats weekends. So we're going to do 2 weekends in the summer where everyone asunder is invited to come to the yacht club and then try and get on a boat. So it could be our big keel boats, it could be our little accessible dinghies, it might be something more adventurous like a big fast 29er racing dinghy, or it might be something very relaxing like simply sitting ashore and watching boats go by, or even getting a joyride aboard someone's big power boat, depending on how people feel. And we'll be having kind of a barbecue sort of thing, asking for donations and showing people the wider range of activities that can be done. And then hopefully we would then capture them as a broader audience who say some of them want to continue sailing and pursue that further, and then would kind of get more involved with our program.
So these are obviously, as you mentioned, for people with all sorts of disabilities or challenges, and obviously, I mean, I know from when I was more able-bodied, I really enjoyed being on the water and sailing, and then last year I was in the water with Matt. So Matt is a friend I met through water polo actually, and so I've been on a boat with Matt last year, and that was I really love sailing. So I encourage anybody in Newfoundland and Labrador who's interested, or anybody around the world who can find a program like that like able to sail, that allows you to get on the water, get outside, and enjoy the water. Just do so, and just because you have a disability or you're finding a challenge getting in the water or getting a boat, something like that. So to look for just as you can enjoy life and enjoy the recreational activities or sports that you may not even have thought that avenues cut off to you. So I encourage everybody to look for this charity and to sign up and participate as if they want to. But Matt, would you anything you like to add to say about able sail or just able sailing in general?
Yeah, well, I can speak certainly to across Canada, people who are interested in sailing and checking out any kind of form of accessible sailing. There's a great network called the Able Sail Network, which is in part where we've got our name, because we're working our way through the levels needed to be able to join that network. And they're a network of sailing schools across Canada, or sailing groups that provide accessible sailing. And they're just wonderful. So as resources for Able Sail NL to just contact, almost any one of the member groups has a bunch of people with a really great knowledge base and willing to help people set things up. But also they're there in all the different provinces to provide accessible sailing to people. And then a big one to look for is every year there's a cup called the Mobility Cup, of which we have a goal of hosting by 2025, which is a very tight goal for us. But we think with enough work and support from the larger sailing community and people that are interested in playing with us, we think it's something we could host here, which is this wonderful, massive regatta with these specialized boats called Martin 16s, which are actually built here in Canada now. And they're a boat that is exceptionally adaptable, super fun to sail for anybody at all, and readily takes things like a sip and puff control module that's designed specifically for it, and also has a very proven safe track record with a big heavy bulb of a keel at the bottom so it can't flip over, and a very high quality of build.
I should have actually should kind of explain this before the much earlier, but I know what you mean. But sip and puff controller is, you explain what that is?
Yeah, so as people, you kind of work up the spectrum of more difficult disabilities to get around for being active. At the last level, you get to a point where generally you're still able to breathe on your own. So if you're able to breathe on your own, that means you're breathing in and out. So a sip and puff control system is a system of having some straws right at your mouth so you can sip on one straw or suck on it, and that's 2 command inputs. And with the second straw, you would then have 4 command inputs, etc. So a lot of these sailboats are designed with 1 straw, sip in, sip out, means turn to port and to starboard, or to left and right for you landlubbers. And then the other straw, sip in, sip out, would be to pull in the sails or let out the sails. So even if you've not got any neck mobility, but you still have some breath control, you can control all the controls on a boat.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you. Thanks. And I was going to end on a question I didn't even mention to you that I was going to ask you, but maybe I wouldn't doubt you'll have some stories, but through all your years sailing, any able sailing, or just mainly you're sailing in the Mediterranean or sailing in the lakes around Winnipeg. Have you? Because if anyone's been near a boat, they've seen the boom swing across, and that can wreak a lot of havoc. And obviously, this is the first thing I think of when I think of sailing or concussion. So, have you ever? Do you know anybody? Have you ever had any experience with that boom or any reason why someone to have a concussion on a boat or a brain injury on a boat?
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody in sailing that's done a significant amount of hours at sea that hasn't seen a concussion occur, either from the boom, which is part of the control system for the mainsail on the boat, flying across and cracking someone's head, to even when a boat runs aground and people flying forward and hitting their head against a bulkhead of the boat or even the floor. So absolutely, I've unfortunately been witness to many a concussion in my life.
Yeah.
Most of which weren't from unsafe practice. It's just I've got hundreds of thousands of miles at sea, so I've seen a lot. But definitely, we've dealt with a lot of people with concussions, from members of my family to myself to people far aflung. Fortunately, I've never been witness to anything that has been life-threatening, but I've definitely seen some injuries that, if they were recurred often, I would imagine could cause a lot of potential for CTE, for example.
And again, this is next question, but when did you have your concussion? When did you think you're...
Yeah, which one is more a question? Most
Okay,
of my concussions from sailing would have been when I was much younger and as a kid learning to sail and out, and they would have been, I believe, classed as minor concussions. So from a small boom on a very small boat where, the concussion in my mind would be that I got hit hard enough that I had a bit of aura in it for, a number of minutes. I had a headache afterward, but no memory loss and no blackout period or dizziness or vomiting. Um, so yeah, I believe that's a minor concussion, but I would leave that up to people like yourself who are more experienced in knowing what levels are what.
There's not really levels of concussion. It's true about your anyway. I took a course this year from the University of Calgary and the University of Val. Did a great free concussion course. So although you can't do access it now, but it was an excellent course and gave all sorts of tips about not tips or the advice and stuff and things to study, resources about recovery periods and how long to take and when it's safe to return to sport, to return to learning, return to work. So I encourage anybody to search that stuff for themselves. And also, I was going to mention that I'm searching information for this podcast. I found that Sail Canada. So I'm not sure about in other countries, but I know in Canada, Sail Canada has its own concussion protocol, as does Ontario Sailing Association, the Ontario Sailing Association, and I'm not sure who else, but I know that Sail Canada has an overarching protocol. So hopefully that's something that people will see. So when things happen like it's just Matt just described, when all those inevitable concussions and head hits occur, that you'll know what to do and when for you personally it's safe to return to activity and safe to or just present to really just rest and just take some time off. So I think it's important everybody heed advice such as that. But I'd like to thank Matt. Unless did you have anything else to add about concussions and sailing or?
No, I'd like to thank you very much for this opportunity to have a little chat with you here and learn a little bit more. And I look forward to actually now downloading a whole bunch of these Concussion Talk podcasts and throwing them in my player, and I'll listen to them while I'm doing winch maintenance.
Well, thanks. And I look forward to getting on the water myself this summer. So thank you so much, Matt. And it's great diving on the podcast. And I think this program sounds very, very encouraging.
Perfect. Thank you very much. You have a great day.
Thanks. Music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.